meeting?
Sure. This is a July 22nd, 1921 or 2021
Careful.
meeting of the Solid Waste Ad Hoc Committee concerning the Senate Bill 1383. And Scott, who will participate in it? And
Well, we thought it'd be a good idea to give an overview. That's why we invited Mike Baye, who's well knowledgeable about this new law, to kind of give us the background, where we need to go from here. And then what we're seeking is from the ad hoc committee, what the direction, what do you want staff to work on and bring back at a future ad hoc committee?
okay.
Okay.
Scott, one moment. Mike sent in a presentation, but I need Nalani to let us share the screen or let me share it. So give us one moment.
Right.
Yeah, I tried to put together some slides just to break up the monotony of me talking, and I'll try to power through quickly, but there's a lot of points to cover. And I think if the committee understands kind of where the state's coming from and how this has been building up, then the regulations we're having to deal with will be probably more understandable, and you'll see them in context and the really the direction from the state that we've received from on high. So again, if I could share screen, I could run through it, or vice versa, either way.
We're working on it.
Okay.
Yeah, I just made Nabila co-host, so she can go ahead and share that presentation.
Okay, well, if we could share slide 1, SB 1383, reducing short-lived climate pollutants.
Some technical difficulties, one moment.
I've had a few of those in my day.
Nalani, it still says disabled participant screen sharing.
Yeah, it shows you co-host. Okay, I'm gonna make you the host. So let's see what that does. Give it a shot again.
I know it's still not letting me.
That is very odd. Do you want to just shoot the email over to me real quick, Nabila? Sorry,
Okay.
folks. And then I'll go ahead and share it.
That's right. The technical difficulties let me go get coffee.
There you
There you
go.
go. Okay. There we are. Okay. All right, let me.
Fingers
We've got it.
crossed.
We've got it. We've got it, everyone. Here we are. Ta-da!
All right.
Let's go.
All right, well, I'll just call out when to switch, but let's stay on this one. So again, everybody has probably at this point.
Oh, we need to mute mics, please, everyone.
Excuse me?
I think everyone else needs to mute their mic. Thank you.
Okay, everybody hear me? All right, so SB 1383, basically, you probably all heard something about it. Basically what it is it sets a statewide requirement that we have to reduce the organic waste we send to landfills. 75% by the year 2025. What really makes this law different than AB 939 is it's very prescriptive. AB 939 said, hey, here's the goal. You cities develop your own programs and report to us on how it's going. This is saying, no, you must, you must, you must. And so there's some musts that the cities have to do. There's some musts that the district has to do. And then there's a little bit of gray area. So Providing organic waste collection to all residents and businesses. That's something where the city and the district are doing that. Edible food recovery, establishing those programs. That's going to be more of a city. Conduct outreach and education to all affected parties. Now, this includes the generators. So the residents, the businesses, they have to be educated. The haulers have to go to certain facilities and perform certain functions. Different facilities that sort the material have new requirements. Edible food recovery organizations need to report. There's also planning. Again, the district has a piece in that countywide planning as far as capacity for all this new stuff. Procuring organic waste products, the law builds in having to buy recycled organic waste material, as well as strengthening paper purchasing, because paper comes from trees, it's organics as well. A lot of inspecting and enforcing, and that's an area where we'll go into it a little bit later, but the district has a role, the city has a role, and then there's kind of an undefined piece. I would say specifically the district needs to look at potentially revising the existing agreement to make the hauler more of a partner in the route audits, the new educational material requirements. Now, maybe that can be done under the existing, but that's one area. You need new education and outreach material because the state actually specifies things they want you to get out to the public, stressing the climate impact. You may want to have a waiver process, space constraint for some of your multifamily properties. And then you really need to integrate additional monitoring, enforcement, and reporting programs to jump through all the hoops. So let us go to our next slide. Sorry, that was one of the long ones. So slide number 2, please. There we go. So the state did a study. They found out organic waste is a large percentage of what we're putting in landfills. The other thing that the state is doing that no other state has ever done is they're addressing food insecurity. And the new regulations actually require 20% increase in the amount of food that's donated for human consumption. We can go to the next slide, slide number 3. So I think a historical impact is going on here. Back in 2006, the state passed AB 32 and SB 32. It's the Global Warming Solutions Act. So that's what tied trash, solid waste to climate change. Methane from materials breaking down is considered a short-term climate pollutant now. And so over the years since 2006, the state's slowly been introducing components that are now wrapped into SB 1383. In 2012, AB 341 passed that basically mandated that businesses have a recycling program. So that introduced this ability for the state to mandate behavior with regards to solid waste. That requires and some commercial multifamily properties to recycle organic waste, although the multifamilies were allowed to avoid food waste. And then SB 1383 came along and they mandated single family to recycle their food waste, multifamily, and here we are. So 20 million tons is the estimated amount of material that we have to divert from landfills to meet the goal. Next slide. So again, here are the aggressive targets. the 5.7 million tons you see in 25 that will be allowed organic waste disposal, we have about 7 million that we're currently throwing away. So all the green waste, all the food waste, the district has been ahead of the game in establishing that program. But now SB 1383 requires additional monitoring, reporting, and through a couple little twists on the education. Even though you have a program, you still need to do these other steps. So let's go on to the next slide. I think this is slide 5. So this is kind of historically when SB 1383 was actually adopted back in 2016. What was recently adopted were the associated regulations. It was supposed to be probably a year before they were adopted. So that's why it feels like everything's coming on quickly. There was a lot of focus groups, comments back and forth. But they're in place now ahead of the January 1st, 2022 date. And again, you see that January 2025 on the top right. That's when we have to have that 75% reduction at the landfill and a 20% increase in edible food recovery, which it's going to be difficult to quantify because I don't think we have a good baseline number, but oh well. Let's move to the next slide. So the big thing to look for is the green rectangle on the right, 2024. That is the date that jurisdictions must, not should, must take action against non-compliant entities. So what we have from 2022 when we start having to provide the organics collection to residents and businesses. Again, the district's already providing it, but we need to start monitoring those folks for contamination. The new term in SB 1383 is prohibited container contaminants, kind of cover everything. If you put food in the trash, that food's a prohibited container contaminant. If you put trash in with the green waste and food waste, that trash is a prohibited container contaminant. The state wants 75% of all organics to be separated out and processed and not go to the landfill. That requires significant changes in behavior. So for the next 2 years, they want a monitoring effort and then kind of a warning but educational type notice to go to the offenders. So again, that is a new step that the district should look at doing. In 2024, again, the city of Costa Mesa, for example, they are getting ready to pass a new ordinance. It's been developed. We're just final stages, but it includes those requirements that, hey, if you're a resident, you must have a program. You must separate your stuff properly. If you're a business, same thing. It also introduces the fines, the fine structure. And so again, it may make more sense for the city to actually be the funding entity. But again, I think that's an issue to resolve with your cities, county, between 2022 and 2024. From 2022 forward, I think clearly the district and CRNR need to have an educational notice program to help people change behavior, help them know this shouldn't go in that container, and that's where monitoring programs come in. Next slide.
Hey, Mike, this is Mike Schaefer. Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
So the non-compliant entities, just so that I have it straight, the non-compliant entity would be the city, correct?
Well, no, the non-compliant entity would be the individual resident,
Okay.
or if it's a managed property like a multifamily, that property manager would be the non-compliant entity.
Okay, because I think most of us on the board have thought that the non-compliant entities were always going to be the city, and the city would be defined. So we
Well-
could fine an individual resident for screwing up on their trash, right?
Yeah, it's kind of a downhill roll. So the state is up at the top of the hill and they're saying, okay, this is the behaviors that need to happen. And so the next person in line down the hill is the city or the district, which, hey, you have customers that we want things to happen. If they don't do it, you need to enforce our law, including fining them. If you don't, then you are the non-compliant entity. The state will fine the city if the city doesn't pass this ordinance and enforce SB 1383 regulations by 2024. They have to pass the ordinance before, educate for 2 years, but in 2024. So you're somewhat correct. The city could be the non-compliant entity if fines aren't happening. But the people causing the non-compliance would be the residents and businesses not properly segregating their material to these new regulations.
Yeah, and
Alrighty.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry to belabor this right now, but it's on my mind, so I hope you don't mind.
No problem.
With the way we pick up trash, identifying an individual non-compliant resident is nearly impossible right now. So that means when you talked about
That has never stopped regulation, in my opinion. They allow you to do route audits through a sampling methodology. They just require that you do all of your routes at least once a year. And then another option is to do dump and sorts. So you would take a truck, dump it out, sort it, and see how much contamination you have. So again, that's not clearly defined. What is defined is these are the either or that you can do, but there's not hey, it has to be 37% of the route. They're allowing some leeway there for reasonability.
Okay.
Mr. President.
You're saying the government's allowing for reasonability. That's a stretch, but I understand what you mean.
Somewhat.
Mr. President,
Okay.
I have a comment, Mr. President, if I may.
Sure, Scott.
Sure. Vice President Schaefer, to answer your question about enforcing the individual homes, we do have program in place that we can go and enforce individual homes. You might recall, I think we shared this with the ad hoc committee, probably, correct me if I'm wrong, to be that in 2019, where it's little postcards, that we place on the carts. Basically, we would lift the lids and see if they're contaminated or if they didn't have a job. And if they were contaminated, then they would get this slip on their cart with a little sad face on it saying, sorry, you're not compliant. Or if they are in compliance, then they get a happy face. Hey, you're in compliance. So we do have a program in place. Unfortunately, we didn't fully implement because of COVID-19. And I guess that's one of the questions I have for you, Mike, is the state going to give us, it sounds like they're not, but I just want to confirm it. With COVID-19, we had to delay some of our programs. Is the state going to give us any leeway on that because of COVID-19?
Well, the nice thing is all these regulations don't hit until January of 2022. So I think.
Right, but I guess my point being, we could have had this program implemented already, but we delayed it because of COVID-19. So we could have been ahead of even farther than everyone else, but because of COVID-19, we couldn't do it.
Scott,
Yeah, I think the district is on good footing.
What's that,
Well,
Mike?
I think having the program in place and having the education component, it's one thing to have an ordinance or a policy, but we could have been educating the public, through the website or whatever, and maybe we are. But between now and whenever in 2024, we have to do a massive education. Mike Schaefer, it's easy to tell if there's contamination, if the lid's up and there's cardboard sticking out, or if the mixed waste cart has green waste sticking out. I mean, there's all kinds of easy identifiers for contamination.
I understand that, but what we're gonna run into is we're gonna find someone who's contaminated, And then we're going to go to them to try to enforce it. And they're going to say, oh, I only did it the one time. That's not my regular. I just happen to make, I mean, we're opening up a lot of cans of worms, and I'm sure we can work it out. But
Between
I think
between
the
now and
education-
between now and 2024, we should be doing that.
Agreed.
Yeah,
So that the one-time offenders aren't ever offenders again. I think there's a a horrible number of offenders as I walk around the city in the morning.
No, that is true. That's true. Hey, one more, if I may, one more question, Mr. Brown. I'm sorry, we kind of got off track here, Mike, but.
Oh,
just one
that's okay.
question. Hey, so you mentioned the city of Costa Mesa is passing an ordinance very soon. What about Newport Beach? And is Newport Beach ordinance going to be similar to Costa Mesa's?
Yeah, that's where the specificity of the regulations really help you, because there's not an option. You can't not fine at the prescriptive level that's in the Costa Mesa rewrite. That's the minimum. A city can be more punitive, more draconian than the state law. They can't be less. And no city wants to go out and fine its residents and businesses. So I would venture that universally everybody's going to adopt the same fining structure, which does allow about a 6-month time frame from when you initially let somebody know, hey, you're in violation, you need to correct this. Then there's a follow-up. So you would have to kind of, red flag that account and check in a couple months to see if they've cleaned up their act. If they haven't, you give them another notice. You're on extra double secret probation now. And if you violate it, you're kicked out of Faber College. And then after that, if they still don't, that's when the fines have to be levied, and they're, I think, $150 or something on the first offense. And so again, but all that's spelled out in the code. So what the district would do is, in each city that you're operating in, you would default to that municipal code or a county code if you're in a county pocket, and they all have to adopt basically the same thing. The question becomes, does the district want to get into the fining business, which I'm sure these cities would allow? You have a separate franchise dealing with this group of customers. As long as you're handling it, that really helps the city. But again, the city has code enforcement officers. The city has put those fines in its regulations. So the question becomes, can you legally do those fines, or does it need to default to the city? That's the part I'm saying between 2022 and 2024 that needs to be worked out with your jurisdictions that you share this program with. So again, what I had on this slide kind of breaks out some things and gives a little more depth. And this is, we're nearing the end. So let me just power through. So if you look on the far left, responsibilities, you have to provide a program. The district's already doing that. The city is now putting in code changes where everybody's going to be mandated on the city side as well. The edible food recovery, that's something that the city has to adopt and support. Again, I think the district may want to participate in publicizing whatever the organization or organizations that the city's working with. Orange Coast College's Recovery Kitchen is amazing. I think people would want to support what they're doing. And whether you work with an organization like Food Finders or Abound Food Care, feeding the food insecure is something that the city has to promote. And I think the district may want to participate in that. Education and outreach to the community. The big changes, like I said, are what you have to include in your messaging. Really the stuff about the climate impacts of organics. So that may require fine tuning. Also, there is I forget the regulation, but any substantial language other than English that's spoken in your community, your educational materials have to be in that language as well. The state has never defined substantial. And so in talking to them, they're saying the top two, at minimum languages in your community would be what they would consider the substantial. Procuring recyclable and recovered organic products. This is a big one. Now, I think, again, buying 30% recycled content paper would be something that would be a district responsibility. The paper products that you do buy, making sure that they're recyclable, that would be a district responsibility. But what the state is doing is they're actually calculating an recycled organic waste figure for renewable natural gas, electricity from biomass, compost, mulch. And the city will be given basically a directive that says you must buy X amount of tons of this material or ton equivalent. And it's about 0.08 tons per resident per year. So it's quite a lot of material. So that might be an area where there might be some interplay between the district and the city to hit that goal. And again, any entity that's under contract to a local government, if they use RNG, for example, or if they make a required procurement, that would count towards this overall city goal. So that's one to coordinate with your partner cities. Securing access to recycling and edible food recovery capacity. That's something that you're going to participate in on the recycling side. Now you do have the wonderful CR&R facility in Paris, so you have capacity. You've gone through that hurdle, but you're going to have to quantify that. I don't know if you need a letter or some type of documentation of that capacity and for a term, which you'll present to the county in 2022 when they do that capacity study. There's another one on the food side, but food recovery, that's something the city's going to have to do. And then again, monitoring and enforcement. The city's preparing that ordinance that will support the fines for non-compliance. But again, as I said, I think the district and CR&R need to fine tune that monitoring activity, maybe revise the Happy Face, Sad Face program, tie it into some new educational material, keep track of who has issues, keep track of what routes are examined. And again, there'll be a few new things that CR&R needs to report to the district. So it might be a good time to just kind of streamline all the reporting and look at it and saying, okay, what data isn't as vital versus what is vital? Because frankly, you could spend all day, every day quantifying and reporting. So how do we get the important information so it's available for at any time inspection? The other thing on monitoring and enforcement is SB 1383 has a requirement in it for anonymous tip lines. So if somebody wants to call up and say, hey, my neighbor's throwing food in the trash, you have to have the ability to anonymously track that and follow up. Now it's going to devolve into this guy cut my roses, so I'm going to call the city on him. You know, it's invariably going to happen, but hey, it's the law. So that's another bit of monitoring that we can thank the state for. So let's go to our next slide, and we're almost done, I promise. So again, here's the requirements. Down at the bottom in the blue, appropriate educational material must be provided to linguistically isolated households. So basically, appropriate means we have to include some of the climate impacts in education, and linguistically isolated is basically you have to do English and Spanish. If you have another large or significant is the state term language spoken in your jurisdiction, then it might be 3. Next slide, please. Okay, and again, this is kind of showing the closing of the loop, why the state is going to give these minimum procurement requirements to the city. Again, the paper procurement requirements I feel are applicable to the district. So you'll have to purchase recycled content paper when it is available at the same price or less than virgin material. And then the whole, what is it, an FTC regulation or recycling guidelines. Essentially, it says that the products that you purchase that are made out of paper need to be recyclable. Those are the two to be concerned about.
Mike, if I can ask a question, if we bought biogas for our fleet, would that comply with the procurement requirements?
It would if it is from an approved source. So that is the challenge with the state, because they don't have a handy dandy list of, hey, if you buy your compost for these guys, it counts. I would think with renewable natural gas, most all of it would count. I think the big challenge is how is the gas company, for example, that purchases gas from the CRNR digester. How are they going to know which molecule in their pipeline is renewable versus non-renewable? And that was one of the things I had asked the state, have you put any guidelines in place? Because if I ran a gas company, I'd say, sure, I can sell you RNG. It's going to cost 3 times as much as the regular stuff, since I know the state's making you buy it. And there's really nothing in place to regulate that. So I think, I think the gas company is a good company. They're not going to take advantage, but over time, I think that's something that has to be worked out. So with any of your procurement, I would include CalRecycle in the loop and say, hey, this is a procurement we want to make. Is this going to count? And make them bless it rather than trust that they will and then be unpleasantly surprised later.
So what I'm thinking about, Mike, is biogas for our wastewater fleet, not our solid waste fleet. So
Yeah.
that's CNR. They have the RNG, but with our fleet, our wastewater fleet, right? I got to truck in the gas, right?
Mhm.
And I know in previous organizations I worked for, we did use biogas that was organic. And the great thing about that is that you don't have to do any upgrades to your diesel engine. It's compatible to current diesel engines.
Yeah, that would be awesome. And that would probably be the most bulletproof way of doing it, Scott. If you can do that, again, I would just do that one little double check with CalRecycle that this is our vendor we're getting it from, this is the source, so that they bless it.
Cool.
Let's go to the last slide then. Okay, so again, we talked about the infrastructure, and that picture, at least in the middle, looks very familiar. I think Mike might recognize that as well. I think that's the AD system in Paris that your material's going to. So you're one of the fortunate ones. You have a facility with capacity. The state believes we're going to need 50 to 100 additional facilities above what we have now to handle all of this material that's coming in. So again, that's why they're doing this capacity study, and we'll see what comes from that. But again, for the district, it's a matter of just getting some type of instrument to provide to the county in 2022 that shows, yes, we have available capacity for full implementation of our program. Then the city of Costa Mesa has to handle the commercial side, same with city of Newport Beach. Anything you're not hauling, they would have to do their part of the capacity study. And then finally, the last slide just provides a couple links I think everybody should sign up for, get on the state's listserv. So when any kind of workshop comes up, any new information drops on their website, you'll be notified. And then the middle one is the state's organics page. Short-lived climate pollutants is the last little bit there on the address. And they have links to just about everything there, and they're adding more information now, every month. So that's really where the latest, greatest data is. And then of course, my contact information is there as well. And I'm available if you have any questions, and that concludes the presentation. So you can take my wonderful slideshow that I borrowed and hacked up from the state off the screen, but you'll find a complete slideshow with like close to 30 slides that I've taken some from. So if you love slideshows, that's the place to go.
Thank you, Mike. Mr. President, if I can ask a few more questions, that's all right. Nolani, well, one thing, Nolani, if you can take that slide presentation and put it on our website on the staff report, so staff and the public have easy access to it.
Sure.
Question for you, Mike, regarding AD facilities. You say, the state says we're going to have to construct more of those facilities. Are you aware of any other waste haulers in the planning phase or the construction phase of AD facilities? Because I believe EDCO down in San Diego, we're planning on putting an AD facility in Escondido, I believe. Do you know, can you confirm that, or do you know any other haulers are constructing AD facilities?
I cannot at this point in time. I do know from some of the jurisdictions I'm working with that a lot of people are going for the food waste, green waste composting route. For example, Waste Management has purchased land up around Bakersfield, and they're talking about shipping stuff up there for composting. I think Waste Management is also looking at this ORIC system, which will actually squeeze out the organics from the trash, which I have some challenges with. I think the problem with the AD facilities is it's just such a huge capital outlay that haulers are looking for everything else. And I think, my opinion is the big national guys like Republican Waste Management, their out-of-state headquarters are just kind of taking a wait and see and not wanting to commit to such a huge capital expenditure if they don't have to. That's where, again, my opinion is the state's probably going to drive this after they get the capacity study, because nobody really knows how much capacity we have. So again, sorry, I don't have a better answer, but hopefully a few more are coming online, because the way it's written, that's really the only option. You're going to do AD to composting, or you're just going to go straight to composting. There's no approved magic technology that will substitute, at least at this point.
Yeah, I'll try to do some little research. It sounded like to me that EDCO, which is a family-owned company down in San Diego, and they Mike, they have the subsidiary company in Fontana called Burtec. They're just like, to me, they're like CR&R, very similar to CR&R. And it sounded like they were very committed to the AD facility in Escondido. And I remember, if you correct me wrong, Mike, but I think Republic was going to try to put an AD facility in Anaheim, but then the residents just came out unglued and just pushed back really hard, and they scrapped that, I believe. So
yeah, and they were actually, one of my cities, Los Alamitos, they were using the base there for an outdoor composting operation with Agerman, and then that got closed down because of resident complaints. So there's going to be some type of conflict, I think, at some point between the state and local governments to say, hey, for the greater good, we need a facility here. That's why all the cities have to report in their annual report if they have any abandoned sites or any sites that would be good for an organics facility. The state's kind of gathering all this information now, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's a nudge at some point if we are truly 50 to 100 facilities light of where we need to be.
And apparently the wastewater agency, the wastewater profession, it looks like they're going to start getting into this endeavor, and President Newton could probably attest to this, but Orange County Sanitation District, they have digesters on their facilities, and they're going to start taking organics. I think they've already sent a letter out to some of their cities saying, hey, we can accept organics. So I would assume other wastewater treatment plants might do the same thing, because they already have digesters already.
Well, I think food waste.
Well, that's the Waste Management Core program, right? Yeah, they do a slurry. They whip the food waste into a slurry and pump it into digesters. And again, that will work very well on the commercial side.
Yeah.
And potentially on the residential side for programs that say, hey, bag your food waste and throw it in along with your green waste. But again, I don't know. I saw that communication from the Orange County Sanitation Districts, and they were talking about their compost that they create. And again, because of the source, I don't know a lot about the end compost product. So again, I think the district has the ideal setup already with CRNR, green waste food mix through digester to compost. That should always have a market.
Sure.
Yeah, Orange County Sand District basically is going to take in 150 tons a day of food waste, but it'll strictly be from the people who make ice cream and, you know, and anything that's slurryable. The major problem now is to determine who's going to create that slurry. Orange County Sand District would like the haulers to create the slurry, and they don't have room on the site or don't intend yet, you know, to slurry this kind of a product. The compost that they're offering the cities is from their biosolids composting operations. They're offering to bring in, and I forget the number, a significant amount of compost to any jurisdiction that's willing to take it. And I expect jurisdictions are going to get a little more interested with this regulation than they have in the past. They've always offered to bring it back, you know, to put on parks and things. Compost is a significant cost to the city.
Yeah.
And they, Orange County Sand District take their biosolids, they compost it, and then the truck is empty when it comes back to get more biosolids. So they're going to set that up for the cities to use. So they're going to take in you know, a minimal amount of initially a minimal amount of liquid waste, which the cities supposedly are going to get credit for. How that credit is going to be determined. If all of them are in the city of Anaheim, maybe they'll give it all to the city of Anaheim and not spread it throughout the jurisdictions like they're presently talking about. But
So another
new-
question
new-
for Mike, Mr. President, if I may.
sure.
So Mike, as you know, we have the 2-cart system, right? We have the mixed waste where people throw their trash and recyclable materials in one cart and then another cart with their green waste and food scraps. We're apparently the last organization or the only organization probably in California that does this now. And does Cal Recycle really care? If we can prove that we have an effective enforcement program, a monitoring program, and you know, we comply with basically everything in the ordinance, do they care if we have a 2-cart system, or are they going to push us for a 3-cart system?
Well, it depends upon the designation of a high diversion rate facility. So if you're mixing material in a container, if you're not going with the standard 3-cart or 3+ approach, that mixed component that you're taking to a facility, they have to make sure that that facility is able to remove 50% of the organic waste that's in there initially, and then by 2025, the 75% level. So again, it's more of a facility certification challenge. And again, that's something that I haven't seen a lot of specificity and actual documentation from the state on what that is. I don't know, Mike or CRNR may be more familiar with it, but in general, if you mix stuff together and take it to a facility, the facility has to demonstrate the ability to hit this 50% and 75% number, or you won't be allowed to do that type of program. And again, that's a real challenge because it is an effective program and it keeps the streets of your jurisdiction from being inundated with a whole new level of carts. But again, it's one of those things where ultimately the state may decide that for you. And I'll defer to Mike if you have anything to add to that, Mike. Am I kind of on point there.
Before Mike Carey answers that question, I'm assuming, and Mike, again, you can answer, I'm assuming the reason why maybe CNR is pushing for the 3-cart systems is because we are CMSD, we are experiencing a lot of contamination in our mixed waste where people are throwing their green waste and food scraps in there. And so maybe that's the challenge, and that's the challenge for us as an organization. How do we change that behavior? And maybe that's CNR's answer is, well, you go to a 3-cart system. Is that right, Mike Carey?
Yes, that's right. I mean, it's going to be difficult to get to that 75% recovery at the highest threshold with MSD being the only agency necessitating that requirement.
Okay, and just to let everyone know here, if we go to the 3-cart system, I think everyone knows that it's going to be a huge change behavior in our community, right? They've been sold in this 2-cart systems for so many years, and now if we go back to them and say, well, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to go to a 3-cart system, I think we're gonna have a lot of pushback. Well, so before we even approach that, what we're doing, right now we're going out to bid. We're out soliciting bids from opinion firms that do surveys, community citizen surveys. So we're out to bid right now. We're anticipating to open those proposals, I think August 2nd, and hopefully have the survey done with results shared to the board and to the public and the Citizens Advisory Committee by the end of this year, by December. And one of those questions we're going to ask in that survey is, would you support a 3-cart system? Do you want a 3-cart system? And that's going to help us. If we're going to survey 1,000 people, 1,000 residents, and if the majority of those 1,000 residents says, yes, we support a 3-cart system, I think that makes it a little easier for us to roll that out and do our public education. Hey, this is what the community wants. This is why we're doing it. It's very similar to what we did with the organics, right? Most people when we did a survey, 1,000 people, most of the residents say, hey, we want to do an organic recycling program. So it was easy to sell that to the public and say, hey, look, you guys wanted it, so we're doing it. Now they come back and say, no, we don't want the 3-cart system. Then we're going to have that, the board is going to have that discussion. Do we still proceed or not? But I think it's good to start that engagement with the public to see what they want to do. So that just FYI, that's what we plan on doing.
Scott, I would say having a 3-cart system will make that process for CRNR worse, because now they'll have more room in the mixed cart to put their green waste. And you see green waste sticking out of mixed carts now. All you need is more space in the mixed cart, and they'll fill it up with green waste, unless they understand that that they shouldn't do that, and they have the potential of suffering some consequences. I don't have room for a 3rd cart. I have almost nothing in my mixed waste cart now. But I can see if green waste are the problem in the mixed carts, you make space in the mixed carts, that there's going to be more green waste put in them in some residences.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a huge logistic challenge, because we have some people that already have 2 mixed waste carts and 2 organic carts. So now what are they going to do? Are they going to turn in one of the mixed waste carts and one of the organics and get just a blue cart? It's going to be huge, and I think it's going to be extremely challenging.
And
it
involves
behavior
behavior change, so that would need to happen soon to give everyone time to adjust and
Oh,
do
absolutely.
the behaviors too.
Mike, I wanted to ask you about I'm sorry, Mike. I wanted to ask Mike about the cart colors. We got a lot of mics on here.
Yeah, we do.
Is the state prescribing
Yes.
cart colors, and are they different from our present cart colors?
Well, again, the state has established that gray or black equals trash, blue equals traditional recycling, and green or brown equals organics recycling. As far as the cart bodies, I think you have until 2036 to get those in line, as long as you change the lid of the cart to follow the color sequencing that the state's prescribed, then you're fine. But there's also requirements on signage containers. So, you know, they really are wanting to make sure when somebody walks out to that container, it's
Yeah.
clear what goes in there. So they can't say, oh, I didn't know, or it's too confusing. That's why they want you to up the education, up the monitoring, give these notices, these warnings, additional education, so that when finally finding time comes, you know, you can say, hey, look, we sent you 26 educational pieces, gave you 3 warnings. Come on.
Yeah.
You know, I think that the topic of what we were supposed to talk about this morning was how to achieve compliance with 1383. And, you know, Bob, I look at this, this is going to be a 3 or 4 pronged approach to how we're going to be able to get this out. I think one of the prongs is education. I think we need to sit down with the city and let them know, and we need to sit down with Trepepi and have them formulate some kind of master plan for us on educating not just the public, but other elected officials in our city that just don't get it yet. I mean, they're not, you know, they've got other things they're thinking about, but we need to get that education. Another prong is compliance. You know, as we talk about checking on people and doing all this stuff to make sure everybody's putting the right stuff in the right cart, it's almost like we're going to need more than just one compliance officer. We're going to have have a team of people that are out there, and maybe we can get some help through CR&R with that. You know, their drivers are on scene better than anybody, and if they see the stuff, maybe the drivers are going to have to help us with that. That's kind of a dicey situation, I think, to put CR&R in, but we may need that. And you know, the other prongs are all over the place, but I think the education component, we need to get that going right away, including educating our colleagues over at the city of Costa Mesa on a much broader basis. And I think that's where we need to kick this off, and that's where we're going to get the most bang for what we're doing is getting that education component in a much broader spectrum.
So I think the residential education process can be defined so much easier than the multifamily part. The multifamily part should be defined probably by the city because they have most of the multifamily. We have the small multifamily. The problem we have is we have 6 haulers out or however many haulers the city has, and they're in control of those haulers. Through the regulations and ordinances and contract changes that Mike and the city are working on. Hey, that'll be a nightmare, I believe. We can much more easily get the residents aware and change their behavior. The problem is the residents change every 3 years, so it's going to be an ongoing opportunity and a necessity. You know, presently we have 1 code enforcement officer, and we do some things like you know, carts in public view, which I think is an aesthetic thing, not a fining thing, although it's an ordinance by the city. And you know, we may need to move back from that and have the code enforcement officers spend more time, you know, with this doing the education to get the behavior changes that the residents are going to be required to do.
Yeah.
You know,
that code enforcement officer spends a lot of time. You know, we get a report every month about the code enforcement officer talking to people that are picking stuff out of cans. That may be less of a priority going forward, and leaning more towards what our residents are putting in their cans.
Yeah, that's what I think. Yeah.
So Mr. President, I think Vice President Schaefer is correct. There's a lot of different prongs to this law, and I think he's correct. Maybe we just tackle one at a time to get closer to compliance. So you know what Mike Baez said off the bat. You know, he said we have to revise our existing agreement with CR&R. We have to have new material on education, expressing climate impact. We might want to consider a waiver process for multifamily units. We need to have enforcement program, including monitoring progress and reporting. Also, the coordination with the cities, Costa Mesa and Newport Beach. So of those, from what I'm hearing from Vice President Schaefer, he's suggesting that maybe we focus on the education part first, and then we can bring that back to the ad hoc committee for your comments and suggestions before implementation.
Well, what I think is, I think Mike is suggesting that we have a plan.
Mhm.
And then once we see what the plan elements are,
Okay.
I think that may well bear out what Vice President Schaefer said is, that's a focus. I don't think we can just focus on one thing. There's, you just named 6 or 7 things. All of those things have to at least be strategically planned initially. And then the focus may well go to, the majority of the focus may well go to one component. I don't think, if we start off and spend a year doing education and then discover that, one of the other 5 elements really needed to be begun now, we're not going to have any time to do it.
Well,
So,
what I
yeah.
say is that that's true. Maybe suggestion we come back to the ad hoc committee with a plan element for education, because everything I just listed off right now, we don't have the resources to do it right away off the bat. I've got one person, which is Nabila, and myself. I can help out, but right now, we're busy right now with the assessments. We've got the alkaline battery recycling program with the school is going to be starting up here real soon. We got our HHW grant application we got to work on. There's just a lot of other stuff we're working on. So that's why I'm thinking for us as a staffing level, it'd be helpful if we could focus on one item at a time, and then we can all bring it together after we address all these issues separately.
Well, I think the one item that needs to be focused on is an overall strategic plan. Not pick, not pick one element and go balls to the wall with that element. I don't know what we need to get additional resources, to help us develop the plan potentially. And then staff we can either staff up or whatever we need to do to implement the plan. But once we have a plan, then we can develop the implementation plan, for each of the elements and see how they see if they all need to get going at once, and then obviously we're going to need more resources.
President Newton, this is Mike Carey. Can I ask a question, please?
Sure, Mike, go ahead.
I guess it's more for Mike Ballier, but Senate Bill 619 looks like it's working its way through the legislature, and to my understanding, that would potentially delay enforcement of businesses and residents. What would be your take on that?
I don't have a lot of confidence in it because of the driver. I think the people behind these regulations think the earth, the environment, everything is at stake and that there's no time to waste. So you can see that in how 619 has evolved. Initially, it was to just delay having to do all of this stuff, and then it switched to, well, just delay the fine. So I think they got a hard no on having to put everything in place, and now they're trying to save face on something. But again, the fining piece is really the last step. All the steps before that you're going to have to do either way. So again, I think that the plan isn't that difficult. We kind of laid out the 5 areas, so it's just a matter of going through the 5 areas and say, program in place, check, capacity in place, check. So in the education,
I think we just lost Mike.
Yeah, did he just drop off? Did he drop
Yeah.
off? Oh, man.
While we're waiting for Mike to come back, if he does, there's Mike. Hey, where'd you go?
and I just gave you guys all the answers. So
Good call, Mike. Hey, Bob,
to lay out the general things. Now, the resources and all of that for it would be step 2, but that's something, you know, when I get back in town Thursday, Friday, or next week, or after that, we can kind of lay that out and fine tune that with staff. So, you know, we have the plan, and that's a matter of who's going to be responsible for what, and if it's additional funding that's needed, you know, where in the heck is that going to come from? And that puts you really on par with every other local government in the state. Everybody's trying to figure out how the heck are we going to pay for all this new monitoring and enforcement. So yeah, it's that part isn't easy, but scoping it out is fairly straightforward, in my opinion.
Hey, Bob,
Can I ask
could
a
we-
question?
Wait,
Sorry.
who?
Can I ask a
Nabil-
question, please?
Yeah, go ahead, Nabil.
I think that was Elodie.
Oh, wow.
Elodie, I heard a female voice. And
It was me. I'm sorry.
I guessed
It was
wrong.
me. I don't know what's going on with the audio.
I was
But
just
Mike
gonna
Valley,
ask
if you
what
can
Elodie
just
and Mike from
clarify a little
TAC
bit more
thought.
on education. Did the state give guidelines as to how much education we have to do? Like, do we have to mail out a mailer or a newsletter once a year? Or is
Yeah, I
there
think
kind of
that,
some
again,
guidelines on there that we can, just so staff and our board of directors know just
Well,
how
I
much
think in-
effort?
in
Is there a
going through-
campaign? Like, is there language?
Yeah, I think in going through the regulation, there is a paragraph that kind of lays out what needs to be in it. And so that's where I'm getting the climate impacts and all that. The additional stuff would be like, for example, you do some multifamily properties. So the law says, hey, if you're managing a property and you have a new tenant that moves in, be it multifamily, be it business, within 14 days, you need to provide them with the information on the program, what goes where. So that tells me, okay, we're going to have to produce another piece for tenants in managed properties, however many multifamily units you guys have. There needs to be a fairly effective, here's our program piece. Now you could use your existing brochure and just add some climate stuff in there and go with that. So it's not like you have to completely overhaul your whole campaign. You just have to spice it up with a few things the state wants in messaging, number one, and then number two, have additional items ready to meet these little twists that the state's put in. You know, for example, a new person moves in, you have 14 days to give them your program information. That's going to be tough, but you know, as long as you're making some kind of effort in that regard. So, you know, again, that piece would be, hey, let's go through the regs on education and just double check, triple check. I think I have a pretty good read on it, but I'm a big fan of whatever we then decide would be compliant, running that by the local Cal Recycle office and saying, you know, did we get it? Or is there something we're missing? So we don't expend a lot of resources, then find out later, hey, you know, this little obscure piece we want to see.
Mike, this is Elodie. I have two questions for you. Following up to what Nabila asked regarding, the district has done a great job of standardizing all our social media and newsletters as far as English and Spanish, but regarding a possible third language, is there any quantifying regarding what a significant third language would, when you mentioned significant, is it like 10% of the population? Is there anything defined?
It's completely undefined, and I actually asked Jeffrey Taylor, who's the, you know, high up with one of the local enforcement branches of Cal Recycle, or local assistants rather, and he was the one that said, you know, as long as you should be fine. Yeah, significant isn't defined in the regulations at all, so it's in the eye of the beholder.
Okay.
But in our community, Elodie, in our community, don't you, and Mike, don't you think it would be Vietnamese would be the that second one.
That's why I was asking. I don't know if it's significant enough, but it might be something
Yeah.
we may need to consider.
Well, I think the census would tell us.
Yeah,
what the-
you might need 3 then to jump through that hoop. But again, it's not defined. It's up to the local government to determine what is a significant group.
We'd probably have to get on the same page
and
with the city, I imagine, as well. If the city is going to do a third one for Vietnamese, then maybe.
Yeah.
We'd have to be.
Yeah, that would be a coordination point. And again, the city with its ordinance change in Costa Mesa at least is also doing new formal franchise agreements with all of the non-exclusive haulers that actually has that state model language for education. So their ability to be in sync hopefully will be coming in September. We were shooting for August, but August is almost here. But yeah, no, those are good points. And again, the whole reason for it is you want to be able to educate people, put things in the right container. And if you're going to find somebody, the last thing in the world you want is somebody who's linguistically isolated, who says, hey, you know, I can't understand the materials you sent me, so how in the heck can you find me? So that's the reasoning behind it.
And then my other question was regarding CalRecycle. Are they staffed up for this? I mean, because I know I completely understand the point about we need to check things by them and kind of have them bless it, but have they ramped up their staffing to accommodate the onslaught of questions they're going to be getting?
I don't know. And my real concern is they're responsible for all the state facilities. So like the Orange County Fairgrounds, and I would imagine the Armory or whatever, they have Fairview, if it ever is repurposed as a state facility, they have to manage and enforce there. And I don't know how much they've ramped up, if any. I haven't noticed a ramping up.
Okay.
I have a lot of questions. I'm going to try and narrow it down.
Sorry, Matt. Yeah, Mike, go ahead.
One thing I had, like, and maybe Mike Carey can help answer this, or somebody, is there a big problem with food waste individually? Is there a big problem with people plastic bagging things versus compostable bags? And does the education need to include something about identifying compostable bags and resources for getting compostable bags so that people have an easier time collecting food scrap material at home?
Yeah, that's true. We would not want any of the food waste or organic waste to be in traditional plastic bags. And I think.
Is that an issue now?
What's that?
Does that seem to be an issue now?
It is an issue, and it's an issue on the processing side for us. I think part of the education component of this would be the promotion and description of the compostable bags and where to get them and how to use them.
And countertop containers as well. I think, like, making it as easy as possible. Like, I just have a little ceramic jar with a compostable bag in it, and it makes it easy, but educating the public on easy ways to separate your food material and make, because you know, anything that requires compliance, you know, and behavior change, as easy as you can make it, the better compliance you're going to get. So I think a big part of the education, especially on the residential side, is going to be easy places to get compostable bags, easy places to have something that still looks nice on the countertop that you can stick a compostable bag in and take it out every few days, instead of making multiple daily trips to the can, and that kind of thing, I think should be included in the education.
Right, best practices.
So other questions I have: public waste cans and beaches and parks and all that. Does that mean that there now needs to be separate food containers? And when we have people on the beach at Newport Beach and they're setting up their tents and setting up for the day, is there going to need to be enforcement on having food scrap separated out from things like that? Are the cities going to need to put out extra cans? And if so, do we need to educate the cities and the state beaches and everything on setting that up?
Well, that's a good point. And that appears where it's headed. SB 1383 has language in it that says if you're a business owner throughout your facility, you need to have a recycling container by each trash container. And if food is in the equation in that area of your facility, you need to have all three. AB 827 was a regulation that passed on public space recycling. If you're a business and you sell something at your place of business that people consume there, then you need to provide recycling containers and organic waste recycling containers there. So like the donut shops, the Subways, all that, they can't just have a trash can, they have to have all three. So I think it follows reasoning that those state beaches, city beaches, you know, just having a trash can is not where we're headed as a society. You need to have all three because people are going to have recyclables and they're going to have organic waste. I don't specifically see that, but I do see city facilities being considered businesses, and therefore, if you follow that logic, the beach as a city beach would be a city facility, so it would have to have those containers. So it's a good point, and I think it's one the state will be hammering home over the next year or two, because they're going to inspect the city, and trust me, there'll be a year where that's their focus. Somebody will bring up, hey, what about the beaches and parks? And then that will be the messaging from the local enforcement, local assistance staff.
I'm assuming then that's also grocery stores eliminating their food waste and.
Yeah, and again, that's a challenge on the commercial side for all cities is they have to do automatic subscription, automatic services. And so grocery stores that have their own programs, the cities are going to have to start monitoring those and making sure that that's complete between their edible food donations and their internal backhaul programs. Is there any organics that's still going in the trash? And if it is, they have to subscribe to a program. So it's a lot of logistical challenges on the commercial side, most definitely.
And I think the rest of my questions are more curiosity for myself on other things, so we can loop back if we have time.
Well, just go ahead.
Okay. Well, one thing I wanted to know, at the landfill level, do we have any of the recovery systems in to capture the methane that's in there now?
Yeah.
Well, that was one of the early complaints with the regulations is the county had spent millions of dollars for methane recovery systems. So they were saying, why is methane in the landfill bad or a problem? You know, we spent millions of dollars to capture it. But to my understanding, that question was never answered by the state. So I don't have a clear answer to that, nor, you know, what transporting this material all over the place to be composted, sometimes outdoors, is that, you know, environmentally better. And again, I think we could drive ourselves crazy with that discussion. You know, we have the law in front of us, so I choose to focus on, okay, how do we jump through those hoops?
Yeah, I was mainly just curious because I mean, I always think prevention is better, and I think this is a good focus, is to reduce rather than recycle. But it was my curiosity there. And then my last thing with the recyclable procurement is there I know we talked about paper, is there like a single-use plastic component in that regulation?
I'll have to go through. There's a model ordinance for jurisdictions, and it's the focus is really on organics, of which paper cardboard is part of that. So they really want to make sure procurement policies are buying recycled, 30% recycled content. The paper products you're buying can be recycled. And then on the organics, to support all these facilities that are now having to process new material, that's why they're mandating cities to purchase the products that come from those facilities. So that is a set formula, and it's sent to the city. Here's what you have to purchase, and it's quite a bit of material, 0.8 tons per resident per year. I think Costa Mesa's are 9,000 tons of mulch, for example. If they just said, okay, we'll buy mulch, you have to buy over 9,000 tons of it to meet that annual state goal. That's a lot. That's would probably be a foot high through every bit of parkland in the city. So again, RNG, things like that are definitely helpful. So it's going to be a challenge for everyone.
Another education thing I just thought of, food waste containers, such as like pizza boxes that are soiled with grease. I know at other places where I've had composting, those are compostable. I've been told that's not really what the system that's in place now. We don't want those in the green waste, but clarifying if those things can go into green waste, if there's a way to deal with those, because they're not really recyclable items with food waste. And then teaching residents about food containers, like the little foldable, like Chinese plastic boxes, or the lined papers that have plastic in them that are not really going to be considered green waste. That's another, I think, important thing to focus with the education, so we don't get those materials in the green waste.
Yeah, and again, you bring up a good point. We were talking earlier about compostable bags and compostable utensils. In some jurisdictions I work in, those are not compostable simply because the soils product company, that material doesn't break down quick enough for them to turn the product over and sell it. So while it's technically compostable, it's not in their application. So that's where it's really incumbent to work with the hauler to say, okay, what are your acceptable materials in each of these containers, and then really reinforce that with your messaging so there's no guesswork. But it's good that they accept compostable bags here. Like I said, I have jurisdictions where no bags, and that's a challenge.
And without those bags, the food, collecting the food from residents, I think would be just a horrible uphill battle.
Yeah, and they're making trucks now that supposedly have a internal container wash feature, but whether that would be effective or not. So yeah, I think bags are very important for the odor issue, but again, having a hauler that can incorporate that into their program is important.
Cool. Thank you.
Do any other directors have any questions?
Hey, Bob,
no.
this is Mike. I'm sorry. I sent you a text, you and Scott. I have a situation at work that I'm going to have to leave the meeting. So I apologize to everyone, but duty calls. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
Truly an emergency.
Good luck.
So Mr. President, I'm looking for direction from the committee. We've got a lot on our plate to tackle. So what do you want us to do? Do you want us to develop a draft strategic plan and present it to the ad hoc committee when it's ready? Or do you want us to, bring back an education plan? Do you want us to go ahead and meet with the city and come back and talk to you about our discussion with the city? What is it? What direction do you want to give the staff?
Well, I think all of the above are going to be potential elements in the strategic plan. And so if I think staff, it sounds like, Scott, you believe staff will be overloaded, they can't take on more than one element at a time. I think then, I think we ought to hire Mike Ballier to do the strategic plan and let staff, begin to focus on, potentially focus on the education element. And then once Mike's done with the strategic plan, that may continue or it may change the efforts. So the overall plan and what needs to be achieved needs to be written down. And then we can, then a plan has to be developed to how to implement those elements in the strategic plan. and that'll determine the timing of it and whatnot, but you know, and Mike is writing ordinances and whatnot for the city and the haulers. And I expect those things would be directly applicable to the, you know, the small multifamily units that we're responsible for. Thank God we didn't get from the city the large multifamily units. The nightmare for us, I believe, is going to be in the multifamily units. The residences, given enough time, can potentially make behavior changes. At least we can minimize the behavior changes if we know what behaviors, what the plan tells us how to get those behaviors changed. You know, I think you're well short of staff, and so unless we know the overall strategic plan for how to become compliant, and I think Mike can put that together in a relatively short period of time. And then staff and the board can be advised, for how to proceed, what resources we need. I mean, that's
Okay.
my general
Yeah.
opinion.
Okay, that's clear. So Mike Baye staff will.
And
get in touch with you.
I called Mike to get him off this so that, he wouldn't interfere with. I'm
So, staff, Mike
just
Baye,
kidding.
Mike Baye, staff will be in touch with you soon. We can talk about how to proceed with the plan, and obviously the staff's going to want some input on it, and there'll be some coordination with Mike Baye, and then we can, when we're ready, we can submit a draft to the ad hoc committee for review and comments.
Yeah,
If I can make a suggestion to first steps, education and monitoring depend a lot on the type of cart system that we have. So in reviewing our agreement and the SB 1383 guidelines, Mike Baye had already pointed out how it's very different. What would be expected of CMSD if we keep a 2-cart system versus a 3-cart system? So some direction from the board, maybe, just kind of have that conversation of what it would look like. I know we're waiting for results in the community survey, but just maybe discussing that a little further would help with the elements of the strategic plan.
Well, I think Mike can put in there, what the opportunities with the 3-cart system might be, and or what the adverse impacts of the 3-cart system could be. And the CR&R's apparently bending our ear, to go to a 3-cart system. And then we have and we have what you just mentioned, Nabilia, is the citizen survey. I think if we take a first quick look at doing the strategic plan, those elements at least will have question marks beside them. And I think the staff and the board then, will have more information to make that determination.
Yeah, no, that's clear. Again, when we present a plan, it'll be a draft, and so we understand draft plans are that's it, just a draft. They are there for changes, for revisions. So at least let's look at the plan first step and go from there. So I think we've got our directions, Mr. President. So.
Well, I appreciate all the input and the questions, and all the answers that Mike has provided and or tried to provide. It's an evolving process, but unless we make a draft, we could potentially focus on exactly the wrong things. Anyway, I'll start shutting up. I appreciate all your efforts, and Scott, if you need, the plan will determine if we need more resources or whatever.
Okay, very good.
Any other questions or input? If not, I thank you all for participating. I think it was very educational for me. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. And the plan will clarify what that work is anyway. And unless there's any other inputs, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Have a